Today, we've got a guest to help us talk about some of those issues about what's happening next in people's lives, but also talk about his own business and how he helps people make a transition through part of their lives where decisions can be increasingly difficult and increasingly complex. It's Pradip. How are you, Pradip?
I'm very good, thank you, Chris. Good to see you again. It's been such a long time. Summer was great. We had a combination of weather. I think there's a bit of difference between where you are and where I am. We've had a really good summer. We haven't had extreme weather. We've had some downpour, which has really been good for the garden. Yeah. But otherwise, we've been enjoying the weather. We've been going out for walks, long walks, and really we've managed a chance to have a barbecue at home.
Good. It's a weird one because we went to the Lake District wanting to get out on the water, but we underestimated the fact that the Lake District might be the wettest part of England. So there was one day where Sophie, my 8-year-old, wanted to go out on Lake Windermere, and literally, we got up, drove to Lake Windermere. It was pouring rain. Queued up to get the kayak, it was pouring rain. I assumed that because the weather was so bad that they'd say to us, "You're not going out." But they're a tough lot up the Lake District. They don't let anything stop them. So we ended up kayaking on Lake Windermere as the rain poured down, and actually it was great fun. I think what this lockdown period has sort of taught me is. Sometimes you have experiences that you assume aren't going to be like the ideal, but you just make the most of them, don't you?
Yeah, you do, and I think this is a beauty about it. When you're out in nature, don't worry about the weather, whatever the weather is. Even if it's a worst case weather, just take it in stride. I mean, just the mere experience of it is really valuable in itself. You talked about the rain. We have an issue that when it rains, we take cover. But if you actually stand in the rain, you can feel the rain falling on your face and on your head. And I think that's an experience really valuable to have.
Yeah, 100%.
Getting away from it. Certainly, your experience at Lake Windermere, the Lake District, I did that at school time. We went camping. So we did kayaking. And we had all sorts of weather. And actually, with the tents. So you can imagine water pouring down in the middle of the night. Through the tent and on each side as well, and that was a really, really good experience. And in those days, we didn't have the camping equipment that we have now. It's just basic stuff, no sleeping bags, just a couple of blankets.
Yeah. So I mean, we did do the camping experience. We stayed at hotels and B&Bs and stuff like that. But being out in nature, there was one day where we got a boat as well, and that was amazing. It was just sort of. There's a sense of freedom on being out in the water. It was just good. So I'm really glad you're joining us today because one of the things that I want to be talking about is that the research that we've recently done into how people are feeling about making some important life decisions moving forward, and I want to share that research with you, our audience, and perhaps have a bit of discussion on it. So to give you a bit of an understanding of the research we did, a lot of the work we do at Cervello, particularly with private clients, is at a point of their life where they're making a transition. Now that may be because of redundancy, that may be because they've reached an age where they're thinking what happens next, and they're trying to make some decisions about whether they can potentially afford to retire, whatever retirement looks like for them, that they can afford to have a bit more autonomy over their time, but they need some support about making sure that they've got their financial elements in play, so that they can do that. And what effectively our job is to make sure that they'll never run out of money again. So what we're curious about, and what we wanted to do some research on, is understanding what things people are thinking about when they're making these sort of decisions. And if I'm being frank, Pradip, there was some things in the research that we expected, and there were certain things that surprised us, and I'm going to share the research with you so we can talk about that. So just so you've got an understanding of sort of what we're doing with the research. I'm going to share the research with you today, but we have got a white paper that we've written coming out end of September that's going to contain two things. It's going to contain our research, but it's going to contain a process that we use with our clients at the minute to help them navigate some of those decisions, not only from a financial perspective, but also from a looking at it as a more holistic decision-making process. Because even if you've got enough money in the world, you may decide still not to stop work, and that's one of the things we're going to be talking about. So what I'm going to do is highlight some of the things that have come up, and let's have a conversation about what we found. So the first thing that we found was attitudes to conventional retirement are changing. Okay, so back 30, 40 years ago when my uncle retired, he worked for Tate and Lyle for all of his life, and he got to an age of 60, got his pension, and just gold watch or whatever they gave you when you retired from Tate and Lyle, and you just stopped. You didn't work at all. And I don't think that, the research tells us, and there was a decent number of people who replied to this research, that interestingly, the amount of people who are looking at a conventional style retirement is still quite high, 52%. So people have told us that they intend to retire and work isn't a continued component part of their life. But what we call a new model retirement, a retirement that involves activities that look like work as part of it, are increasing in popularity. And bear in mind that some of that is because people need to continue to work to get enough money to stop when they need to, but a big chunk of that 48% was people who could afford to stop, but felt that work provided an important component part of their life. What are your thoughts on that, Pradip?
Interesting research. Thank you for sharing that, Chris. I didn't know about the actual numbers of the conventional retirement attitude. I thought that had been left a long time ago because we have a lot of opportunities to retire early and also design something that you can do now.
But I tell you what I found interesting. You know, I mean, even though 52% is still a majority, it's the shift over the last 30 years from people saying this is what I want and this is what my retirement looks like, which is effectively no work, has shifted massively in the last 30 years to a sort of a 50-50 balance.
And that's quite interesting, actually, because my experience sort of borderlines along those percentages wise as well. A lot of people I come across want to retire as soon as they can, really. And I've seen some people retire at the age of 50 when they're financially well off, and they've got something to go to. Some of them are having a very relaxed life. You know, they're not activity-based. They love their home. So they spend time with their home and their family. And that works really well for them. If they've got grandchildren or extended families, you know, they can go to a lot of family activities. But the activity-based side is very interesting because of my experience is that a lot of people coming up to retirement are physically in reasonably good health and financially well off. So they can afford to basically go for experience or something. So they go and involve in activity. You heard about gap years, but you used to be a university student ago.
Yeah.
Well, I've heard of grand gap years. And these are the generation whose children have grown up going on gap years, but they missed out in their education system. So they say, well, if they can do it, so can we. So now they can afford the time. And they don't practically go hitchhiking, but they go to remote places, roughing it. And, you know, not living in YMCA or YWC anymore, they're living in top-class hotels.
Yeah.
But really, the idea is to experience nature and also culture, which is for the younger generations. I encourage the teenagers during university period to go out and explore the wide world. But at the moment everything is on lockdown, so we can't.
Yeah, that's the most frustrating thing about lockdown for me, the lack of travel. But we'll hopefully that will come back. So yeah, so we're in a position where we've seen the shift between conventional retirement over the last few decades being more popular, but people moving towards a more balanced life where work might play a part, not always for financial reasons, but for other reasons as well. The next big piece of research we've looked at is we were curious about whether lockdown and the recent epidemic has changed the way that people perceive their financial futures. And interestingly, for a lot of people, it has. So for about 3/4, lockdown has changed their perspective. For about sort of just over a quarter, it's business as usual. Now, I'm having conversations. The reason we asked that is because throughout lockdown and directly after, I was having conversations with clients every day who were telling me, actually, Chris, we're in a position where this is either shown us that retirement might be a good thing for us because we're loving spending the time at home. Other people said actually lockdown has shown us that we need to be out and about to enjoy our life fully. But certainly most of the conversations I had highlighted the fact that people wanted to make some changes in their life, not from a financial perspective, but just more generally. And it put into perspective a bit more what they enjoy. What's your conversation with your clients about that in a minute?
Along similar lines, actually, because what we found is that people are having more time to consider where they are in life. Where they used to have this distraction before COVID, they could run away to do things, keep themselves occupied, and, just step out of the door, maybe go camping or something like that. Well, this has done put people home and think what is important to them now. And a lot of them are thinking, you know what, I've had a good, successful career, times are changing very fast, technology is changing very fast. It's become a bit of a, fighting and clamor to catch up with technology, and, it gives a new meaning to rat race. Yeah. They're saying, I'll step back, and what are the choices now, what I can do? Financially, they'll talk to you and say, well, okay, we have financial help, but what can I do moving forward? So a couple of things cropped up. One of them is, look, they've accumulated huge amounts of valuable experience and knowledge and wisdom in their work and their career. They would like to do something with it. They don't want to waste it. So they're applying themselves maybe in a consultancy position role, or in advisory. Some of them have taken a role for non-executive directors.
We see.
But the other side of it, and it's not for financial gain, it's just they want to contribute something back to society or the work environment. Maybe leave it as a legacy. The other part of it is, the other time is, what do they want to do? So sitting down with them, we've sort of worked through what kind of things they left behind, which they've always wanted to do, and pick that hidden passion, bring it to surface, dust it off, and that's what they're living now. Things are doing a bit like gapping, traveling. These are the things they would never have been able to do.
So have you, what have you?
Now they have a choice.
So what have you seen in terms of people changing during lockdown? Has that intensified that conversation, or has there been, actually, I knew what my aspirations were before, I knew what they are now, and I'm actually making no change?
I think very much new aspirations. People are getting a chance to experience what life would be like when you're not in the working environment. This is what you expect when you later life, when you retire. Yeah. So now they've got the experience of the time spent at home. You're there at home 24 hours a day, which you weren't used to. The other thing is you're spending time with the family, which you wouldn't have had time. You would only see the evenings and weekends and holiday time. Now you're with them 24/7. So that has its benefits. Either, the quality time you spend with your family, or on the opposite end of the scale, it can put a lot of strain on relationships. The other part of it is health. They've seen the benefit of health. The government is encouraging people to go out for walks, get some fresh air, to keep fit, which they probably wouldn't have thought about doing, but now they thought, you know what, I've been cooped up for long in the house, I'll go out, just like we did to Lake District. Yeah. So it's giving them a new insight to the potential and possibility of what life could be like after work. So it's opening up a lot of minds for people, and people are recognizing the opportunity.
So the other thing that I wanted to talk about, and again, this is what our research told us. Our research told us that in addition to people's perspectives changing throughout lockdown, we have focused as a practice not only on financial well-being but looking at other aspects of well-being. So how do we use the money to make sure that we're improving other elements of their life? And there's an amazing book that I'd recommend you read called Wellbeing by Tom Rath and Jim Harter, that talks about the elements of well-being and breaks those elements of well-being down into 5 areas. Those 5 areas are financial, social, community, career, work, and physical. And what we wanted to do is understand where people sat today in terms of how they felt, where they were in those 5 aspects. And these are the results that surprised me quite a lot. So just out of interest, Pradip, what do you think is the highest and what do you think is the lowest?
What I would tell you is the ring fence around those 5 areas, and that is time. Because you really say a huge amount of time when you're not working full time. You would have been working Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And in terms of numerics, you're looking at about 3,500 hours per year in your profession, career. And the rest of it, about 1,500, would have been at home. When you retire, you've got something in the region of 5,000 hours per year. So putting into context, how do you manage all those 5 areas? So it's time spent on each one of them.
But where do you think people, at the moment, where do you think people are focused on out of those 5 areas and where do you think they neglect? Because we were surprised about what came up.
A combination of things, actually, in my experience. One of them was health. Something that they wouldn't have paid too much attention when they were working because it was automatically taken care of. You're going to work, you're physically active, mentally active. So that kept you in reasonably good health. Now what they found is that when they're at home, they're not physically active. Mentally, maybe they are. So they find it sluggish.
Okay, interesting. So
this morning I went for a walk and I noticed my next door neighbour. He'd been out and I'd seen how much weight he's put on.
Yeah.
So these are the type of things that people are recognising.
Well, I mean, from a story perspective, I've seen both. So I've seen people who have really used lockdown to the extra time to get fit, and then other people who haven't, who have used it. But the interesting thing is what the research told us. So the research told us that actually people think their social well-being is relatively high. So, and again, this may be based on the fact that we did it during lockdown and people have been making a real effort to stay connected during lockdown. But out of our respondents to our survey, most people felt that their social well-being was really high. Financial was just above average, 3.46. Now, one of the interesting things is we sent this out to all of our Cervello clients, and the financial average that shows is higher than the typical average. So about 40% of the respondents to the survey were speaking to a financial advisor, be it with Cervello or not, because the survey went out quite widely. But one of the things that shows me is speaking to a professional, be it a coach, financial planner, accountant, business coach, adds value to somebody's financial life because the well-being on that is higher than the average. Career came next, and that was the interesting thing for me because if you're approaching that period of life where you can make some interesting decisions about your career, I'd expect people to be taking more control of that and saying, maybe I don't need to work 5 days a week, maybe I can work 4, or maybe I can pick a job I really love. So my assumption was that career well-being would be higher. And as you mentioned, Pradip, physical and community were relatively low. Now, I had a university graduate join us for this particular project, who's in her early 20s, Haja. She did an amazing job helping us with this. And her perspective on this was actually community is still there, but the way that people see community has changed. So whereas community used to be your street or the people you live locally, now it's more online, and maybe that's why people think community is less their community well-being. They don't know their neighbours particularly well, but maybe they're part of new online communities. So I don't know. But what were your thoughts about those levels of well-being, and what surprised you and didn't on those results?
Certainly on all of those 5 areas that you covered, there have been major shifts in the way you think. You talked about financial well-being. For some, they're looking at that, if they're still working or furloughed, it has different capital and way of thinking. For those who've been furloughed, they're not able to do any work, full stop, and they've had a drop in salary. So their financial well-being is a little bit under pressure. For those who are still able to work remotely, like I do, my family does from home, we're still on full wages. But it has its benefit. You don't have the additional expenses of commuting, the money you guys spend buying lunch or spending evening in the city. So all these are saying financial benefits. The social side of it, obviously, when you meet your work colleagues, has changed. Because now you see them more online than offline. And also, because of the way the employers have approached the nature of work, is to encourage people to do other things apart from work.
Yeah.
In my experience, the connection on conference boards and all these have increased tremendously. That it doesn't allow you enough time to do your own work, which means at 5 o'clock when everybody's come offline, you get on to work. So I find that most people working from home are working longer hours through necessity, because try and catch up with the work.
Yeah.
Again, use of technology has increased. The social aspect of it, I find people actually more engaged in even offline as much as online. Online, you find they play pub quizzes and all sorts of games and things, either with colleagues or friends.
100%.
So it's interacting in a different way.
Yeah.
Social-wise, particularly family, there's 2 aspects of social. One is family. So you're more engaged with the family needs to spend more time with the family. With the friends and the wider network, you communicate either by phone, and we certainly have regular Zoom sessions with international families.
Yeah. I think
people are more active. They're a little bit more active. They're more aware of their health and well-being. Initially, it was a big funky stuff. People were just reaching into their food, their home, they're readily available. All of a sudden, they realize they're putting on weight and they're not feeling too well. So they started watching their diet and also taking interest in what they're eating. Baking has taken off like wildfire.
Yeah.
There was a point when you couldn't get flour or sugar or anything like that. So certainly every aspect has changed. The outlook has changed.
Yeah.
People are thinking, they won't go back to normal. It'll have changed. So they're thinking, how can we carry this forward? Interest in cooking, how do you engage with socially, and how do you engage with your health and well-being. So it's opened up new ways of thinking.
Yeah, I agree. So the other thing that we wanted to flag is, as I said, the white paper, where we're going to be going into a lot more detail about both the research we did and the process that we use with clients to help them navigate some of these changes. And again, Friday, we'll talk about your particular approach on this in a minute as well. Is coming out end of September. It's going to be called What Happens Next, and the next is the element that I just want to sort of talk about briefly so that you're ready when it comes out. Next stands for navigate. So the first thing you do when you look at any sort of change in your life is identify what you want to achieve. So what are your future goals, and what's the reason you want to get there? And I'd look at that in terms of not only financial, but how you spend as you said, Pradip, how you spend your time, and where the shortfalls in your well-being might be, and what ones you want to focus on improving. So that then gives a bit of a context in terms of how you spend your time. Once we understand what your goal is, we evaluate where you are now. Now, clearly, our area of expertise and our primary focus is on the financial, and we use software called Cash Flow to understand where you are now and where you're aiming to get to, and working out the gap so that you know exactly what you need to do to navigate that gap. But to ignore those other aspects of well-being and the changes you want to make in your life, I think is a mistake. We need to include part of that conversation, because if you want more time in your life and you need to reduce your hours at work, what impact is that going to have financially, and how do we model that into any sort of plan? Once we know where you are and where you need to get to, what we then need to do is take action. And a lot of people fall down on this element. Certainly our experience is a lot of people come to us because they get to a point where they sort of know where they are, sort of know where they want to get to, need a bit more clarity on that, but then get stuck because they just don't know what action to take to get them there. And certainly execution and taking action, even if it's small bite-sized chunks of action on a regular basis, is going to be helpful. And then you know what's weird? On our trip to the Lake District, we went to the peaks and then went to the lakes and then went back down to Liverpool, and our schedules changed and our plans changed. And I think our trip, our travel full stop this year, because we've changed our plans about 10 times because of what's been going on, is quite a good allegory for life, because we get to a destination or we get close to a destination and actually our goals change. So track is all about making sure that when you're in a position where you're getting towards a goal, you see whether that's still where you want to achieve, and effectively the process starts again. So you go back to navigation, go back to evaluation, go back to execution, and then going back to tracking where you're going and what you need to do to get there on a regular basis, so that as your plans change, you're in a position where you can evaluate where you are. So we're going to be giving people a really clear framework on the questions they need to ask themselves on each step of the process and the action that they can take to get there as part of our white paper. That's going to be out soon, and I'll make sure that when we post this video out on LinkedIn and everywhere else, there'll be a link on the show notes where you can download the white paper for free as and when it comes out. That's what it's going to be look like. What happens next? The 4 vital steps in making sure your financial plan is ready for your life plan. Don't know about the subtitle. I might change that because I think it's not as good as it could be, but we will certainly make sure that we get that to you if it's going to be useful if you're navigating that stage of your life. And if you've got any questions about any of this, please feel free to get in touch. Number for the office is on there, and my email address is on there. We'd love to hear from you, particularly if you're going through that period where you're thinking about what's next and you need some support, both from a financial wellbeing perspective, but more generally to help you through that process. So, Pradip, I just want to talk a little bit about you and your business, and thanks for your input in terms of helping us understand your perspective on that. But one thing we haven't talked about is why you're an expert in this area. So, tell us a little bit about you and your business.
Yeah, I'd love to share about who I am really. I think a lot of people we like to know about the other person and help to build a rapport as well. In a nutshell, I'm married to an amazing lady and I have 2 grown-up boys. They're both independent. We work extensively with big consulting companies. We live in a lovely part of it, the second floor of Chatsworth 100, which is near the lakeside shopping mall and accessible by motorway. I love the outdoors, and for me, there are some amazing places around the River Thames. We have the Rainer Marsh, which is on your doorstep.
Yep.
And just 3 months ago, there's plenty of scenic walks along the river. And it's a good place to have, particularly with lockdown. We've done loads of work on walking and explored new areas that we haven't seen before. That passion of mine has actually taken me into other areas, walking. And 3 years ago, I trekked the Himalayas and I raised over 3,250 pounds for Age UK Essex.
Amazing.
Since then, I've trekked the 3 peaks, which is, you probably passed through the Lake District.
Well, we were near Scarfell Pike, so we didn't go up it, but we weren't a million miles away.
Oh, you missed out big time on that. But it doesn't matter about the weather. If you're well equipped, it would have been worth it. And that's another thing that on my wish list to do Scarfell Pike. So there's plenty of opportunities in the UK, but overseas as well. I'd like to do Machu Picchu as well, so that's going to be probably another one. I also love gardening, and it's giving me time to spend time in the garden. What I found that when you're online, it's so intense. You're your movement is very little, except when you just get up to get a coffee or something. So sometimes, once in a while, I take time out, half an hour or something, do something in the garden, physical. I'm touching the soils, plants, tools, things, and it breaks the monotony of routine. And also, what is it? I love traveling, but at the moment we can't do that. So I'm ready to go to explore new parts around the globe. What I value also is family and friends and colleagues as well. One of the things I've done is make a point of finding time in the evening, whatever time, a couple of minutes, pick up the phone, bring someone up and just ask them, hello, how are you? And that in itself keeps people motivated. It's the same thing with my clients, because I used to see them on networking and I don't see them now. So I'll pick up the phone anytime just to see how they are. And I find they're in a mixed bag. Some of them are really good places. Some of them are in down places. And research shows that about 40 to 60% who are suffering from anxiety and fear, and it's actually affecting their health.
Yeah.
So it's lifting them out of their great spots in the area. And I think that being with families and friends and colleagues is so important for our personal growth and learning. It teaches you learn a lot from them. You learn a lot about yourself as well. And I think it's key to being an introvert is one thing, but you have to weigh between introvert and being an extrovert.
Yeah.
I've seen those who are extremely introvert, and they don't have much to talk about because they're so self-sufficient and independent that they can't interact with others. Whereas like you and I, we are pretty much extroverts. We talk to anybody and we enjoy each other's company, and that's time well spent. And I enjoy most of the online workshops that we work and conferences, and it's so invigorating.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate that. We put a lot of effort into running the inner circles and getting our professional network together to collaborate. So help me understand. The client comes to see you. Who are they typically, and how do you help them specifically?
I can hear you, but I missed what you were saying.
Okay, so to help me understand, so client comes to see you. Who are they typically, and at what stage of their life are they at, and how can you help them specifically?
I think we've covered some of these already, but I'll go through it again. I work mostly with people who are grey hair, silver hair, or no hair. The time shows the maturity physically and mentally. And we all work and look toward the day when we wish to have a leisurely later life. Along with your working, your retirement financial planning is something that you help out with. I support my clients with designing other aspects of their life. You mentioned 5 of those key points there, but mine is a wider agenda, and we start with any of those, and we work on it. So I support with designing what your life would look like, and then, like you said, taking actions. Now, actions again, most people will be excited with all the prospects of goal setting and looking ahead, but they fall flat at the first hurdle. Now, that is because often I find we're habitual creatures. We go back to the old ways of doing things, and no matter how attractive the new ways is, it's a bit like a Red Bull treatment. You have a can of Red Bull and you think, great, life is great, until it wears out and then you go back to your old ways. So I'm there as a support for them to ensure that they do take positive actions. And like next, the last one is tracking, making sure that they're on track, and we work on that. But above that, it's not meant to be tedious. It's meant to be fun.
Yeah.
It's more invigorating.
Well, it's about future opportunities, isn't it? It's about what happens next. It should be an exciting experience, because the future should be exciting, but it can be nervous for people who are, as you say, used to a particular sort of pace of life and used to a particular thing that they're doing, and then this big change happens, and it might be redundancy, and it might be a decision they've made about sort of changing their life, but that can be scary. So, Pradip, the other thing I was going to ask you is, I know you do group and one-to-one. What's the difference, and why might that work for different people in different contexts? Pradip, can you hear me?
Sorry, I missed that. The line closed a bit. I can hear you now clearly.
Good.
The last statement.
So I know you do group work and one-to-one work. Help me understand what the difference is, and why might somebody who needs your services might benefit from one and not the other.
There's a combination of reasons. I do, like I said, I work both with client on one-to-one basis, And these can be business owners who are planning ahead for later life after running the business. And I also work with people who are executives who run large corporations, and they're looking ahead or maybe sort of taking a step back from their corporate work and then plan ahead. Now, the way it works is the one-to-one is a very personalized approach. There are things that people would not like to talk to anybody else about, so it's confiding and then unwrapping what they have been carrying throughout their lives, and then seeing what they do with it. The group side, group coaching side of it, group setting works very well. It's an economic sense, and it works for organizations that have a number of people coming up to retirement or considering retirement. So we bring them together, and we do a lot of similar work, but it's also peer work, so they exchange ideas. Maybe that's something that can take from the group and develop. Maybe they might even make friendship out of it, and then they participate in activities.
But this is one of the things, isn't it? Getting people together who have got potentially similar sort of experiences, but maybe a slightly different perspective. And we've experienced it through the events that we run, and we run one. We've previously in the past run advisor mastermind events so that we can improve our practice based on what other people are doing in their businesses, but also in the inner circle events we run for professionals. Part of the benefit of that is learning from each other's experiences and maybe sort of looking at things from a different perspective that you previously wouldn't have done, particularly if the challenges are the same in the room. You can sort of maybe benefit from that, right? Benefit from other people's perspectives.
You do. It's a shared experience and shared knowledge. Like you said, they may come from civil experience. You're in a similar work environment. You may have your respective work and responsibilities.
Interestingly, I know you speak and talk a little bit about thriving and not just surviving in later years. What do you see the differences between people who thrive in their later years and not just survive? And what action do you think people can take to make sure that that's the case?
It actually starts from how you transit yourself from your work environment, full-time work environment, into your later life. And that, like you explained earlier today, is either through redundancy or by choice, or maybe because of your health challenges. And now, if it's through redundancy, again, that's twofold. Is it by choice or was it compulsory redundancy? If it's a compulsory redundancy, it may leave a bitter taste, which means that dictates how you're moving forward, and that makes it difficult to settle in. If it's by choice, you're already decided positively that yes, I'm going to do something with it. Again, with the health, if it's you're made redundant or you leave work environment.
Tell us again about how you thrive and not just survive in later years.
Thrive and survive is either that, or I call it actually managing or coping or thriving. And it takes a mindset. Sometimes you go through challenges and then you find there's no way out. So you close yourself into a space and say, how unfair the world is, how unfair the life is, and you become despondent in that area. But it takes somebody to sort of knock you out of that area and take you out into daylight, basically, and say, look, life is wonderful. Let's look at all the opportunities you have and all the choices you have. And that's when you move towards thriving. Once you see the daylight and say, actually, this is not too bad after all.
And I think you make an important point. It's a process, isn't it? It's not an immediate switch. It's a sort of a period of time that you go through that process.
It's a gradual process.
And what do you? Sorry, go on.
Sorry, you were asking.
So, I suppose one of the things that I'm curious about is with your clients, they're going through this life change, they're going through this process, they might have to learn new skills and perspectives on the world. How do you navigate that change, and what do you think are the most useful things people can learn through going through this process to help them sort of navigate the change?
This is actually the most exciting part of dealing with clients. If they're stuck as to getting a sense of direction, we'll sort of look back at things that they've enjoyed doing, something they're naturally good at. They have a natural affinity or talent for it. And then it's for them to decide what would they like to do. Give an example. I had a client who had a very busy career. He ran a business, he didn't have time for holidays or anything like that. Eventually somebody said, look, you've made a good bit of money, why don't you take a step back and step out of the business and enjoy the rest of your life? So immediately he felt, well, what am I going to go to? So he became my client, and we explored what he used to enjoy before the intensity of his career. And he started talking passionately about the time spent with his father. And they used to go fishing. And he hasn't done fishing since he was an early teenager. And he said, you know, the exciting time we have, we had all these big fishes we had, we went to so many different locations. And he talked really hyped him up. And he said, you know what, I'm going to take you fishing. So he bought himself new fishing gear, new outdoor gear, equipment. And he said, I'm going to do that regularly now. So he started locally in local rivers, moved on to lakes, and then he became more adventurous. And a group of them got together and bought a little boat. So they went deep sea fishing. And alone, they bought a little minibus as well. So they could carry all these people and their equipment, go down to the harbour, and spend a couple of days out.
Love it.
And even now, I get benefit of it because once a month he'll come knocking at my door and give me a couple of large fishes.
Cool.
Freshly caught.
Yeah. So you get fed for the work you do as well.
I do as well, and it's such the beauty of it. And he's got something that he really latches onto. He really loves it, and he shares it. And he's made lots of friends. New fishermen he found in the local area.
Interestingly, I read something on that. Apparently, fishing has really grown in popularity since lockdowns eased because it's one of those things where you can get out in nature. It's a new skill. And it's quite a sort of meditative experience, isn't it? So yeah, it's interesting. Have you ever fished?
Oh God, yes, I have. I always had aspirations to do fishing in a different way. Yeah, I started with my young son. He liked fishing, so we were at his grandparents. We have a canal running there, so I taught him a basic, seaside type of fishing tackle and things. And lo and behold, he caught a couple of fish. He was really excited about it. So I said, when you grow up, we'll do it in a bigger way. So 2 years ago, I went to Ireland for a wedding. Okay. He gave me an opportunity, and I thought, Atlantic Oceans, that's right on the doorstep, County Kerry.
Yeah.
And the day before we were going to fly out to Ireland, I rang around a few boat people, and they said, oh, it's busy season, but give me some time and I'll find you. So he rings me up and he says, tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, be at the harbour. And I said, well, how am I going to find you? Don't worry, we'll find you. And that's what we did.
Cool.
We just took off. We ended up at the harbour. There was only one boat with somebody on it and he was waiting. I said, well, that's our boat. Yeah. And the best part of it was a beautiful, calm sea. So we worried in case it was very choppy, we could get seasick or something like that. But off we went, and then we went around the harbour, the sea edges, and I thought, is this fishing? But what we was doing was we were catching little fishes for baits.
Yeah.
When we caught sufficient enough, we went further out into the sea. And then I remember they dropped the anchor, and we put together all the fishing tackles. And the one that I had was a meter on it. So as I put the line down, I could see what depth it was going to. And it was going to 200 meters.
Okay.
Fantastic. End of the day, we caught loads of fishes. And the skipper was actually cleaning them, scaling them, and preparing them. And he prepared it all for us, so we could actually take it the following day on a Friday, so we had a feast.
Amazing. Sounds really good. And catching your own food is something you don't get to do that often, is it? I suppose with the gardening and the fishing, you could be self-sufficient, Pradip, couldn't you? Just give you a fishing rod and a garden.
We can all do that, yeah. We don't need any processed stuff. We get natural stuff. In fact, I've got a vegetable patch and we grow onions, cucumbers, lettuce, spinach, and we've got some chilies now.
Oh, don't tell me you grow spinach. I'll be right round. I love a bit of spinach. So we've covered off the rest of the questions during our sort of general conversation. So the only thing to do now is just for you to tell us a little bit about how people can get in touch with you and where they can contact you.
Yes, certainly. If you're considering, what next, like you just mentioned, and you've got loads of questions that are not answered, you're struggling for the answers, then all it takes is a phone call. Either give me a call on 07941635319, and we can have an initial chat and have a sense of clarity of where you are and where you'd like to be. And if you feel that's something you are suitable and you could work with, then we can engage with further. I'm on LinkedIn, Pradip Mistry, and also have a website called Lifesmistry. I think life is a mystery until you uncover it, and it's not a mystery anymore.
Yeah, and there's loads of really good content, including blogs and things like that on the website. When I was doing my research, even though we've known each other for some time, I like to prepare for these interviews. So when I was doing my research, I revisited the website and found loads of good stuff on there. So really, really good stuff, and certainly have a look. Pradip, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully you've enjoyed it too.
Likewise, I have indeed, and thank you very much for the invitation. I really enjoyed the show, and I'm looking forward to working a little bit more with more shared clients, actually. There are a lot of people out there who are in the right place to decide what to do next. And I like your acronym, next.
Well, I mean, the intention. I mean, I'm finishing a book at the minute, which is based on the podcast that I was with my daughter, the Kindness Project. But once that's done, I think the idea of what happens next will probably be expanded from the white paper into another book. But that's probably a project that's going to be another 2 to 3 years in the making, but we'll see on that one. But yeah, great to join us. Thank you for watching Cervello Live. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Now we're back in September. We've got guests running all the way through, from now all the way through to the Christmas break. If you're a business owner and you think that you can help some of those clients and you'd like to work with us a bit more closely, get in touch. And certainly one of the things that we look at is interviewing you on Cervello Live. Have a lovely Thursday. Have a great weekend. And I shall see you soon. See you later. Bye.